Good morning. My name is Marcelo Suarez Orozco. I'm the Chancellor of Boston's premier public research university, the University of Massachusetts, Boston. Yeah, okay. I'm pleased to be here at the 2024 Boston Globe Summit for fireside chat on workforce development with my friend, Mayor Michelle Wu, and my new friend, Globe reporter Katie Johnston. This conversation will address a question that is always top of mind for policymakers. At a time of dynamic technological advancement, profound demographic changes, and a transformed employment landscape, how can we ensure that we have the diverse, skilled, and adaptable workforce to keep Boston at the forefront of science, technology, the arts, and the humanities? Make no mistake, we're entering a very, very distinct and unique phase in human evolution. 4 million years ago, we saw the end of the age of bipedalism. It was the age of walking on two legs. 2.5 million years ago was the dawn of the age of the hand, the age of tool making. Today, we live in the age of the neocortex. We are in the cognitive age. And if Boston is to remain the cognitive capital of our country, all sectors in our extraordinary city will need to come together. Higher education, of course, plays a key role in workforce development in the Commonwealth, bringing together sectors, research, and capital around fields that drive economic growth, like healthcare, climate change mitigation, and artificial intelligence. And the business community knows that the demographics are changing. With immigrant families of color, the only segment of our state's population that is growing. At a time when so much out-migration from the state, we need to redouble our efforts to nurture the capital in the families that are the face of the new Boston. In part, this means knowing where your workforce will come from. At UMass Boston, over half of our students are first generation, often from immigrant homes. They're diverse, smart, ambitious, hardworking. They're from here. And 5 years after graduating from our school, over 80% of our students will stay. They will be the workforce of the future in your industries. Unlike students at other Boston and that other town on the other side of the river, they come to Boston with round-trip tickets through Logan Airport. They come and they go. Our students at UMass Boston come from our city. They come through the K Circle and the Red Line, and over 80% of them will stay in this extraordinary city. Investing in our students is an investment in the future workforce of our city and our state. And through UMass Boston's partnership with the City of Boston and other institutions, we're shaping workforce initiatives like New Skills Boston that create high-quality career opportunities for all, with the goal of bridging education employment gaps. We're all looking forward to this timely conversation. And Mayor Wu knows these dynamics, and it is a pleasure to introduce our mayor. I saw the mayor recently chatting with the mayor of Rome, and I think she noted that in Boston, she's used to saying, we're the first of this, we're the first of that. Being in Rome gives you a, let's call it chronological humility, where our firsts are somewhat rachitic when we address the mayor of La Città Eterna, the eternal city. It is such a pleasure to join, and please join me in welcoming Mayor Michelle Wu and Katie Johnston. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcelo. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, Mayor Wu. I'm looking forward to learning more about what the city is doing with its hiring. Prioritizing skills over academic credentials is such a hot topic in the hiring world right now, especially with the cost of college being so high and many industries grappling with labor shortages. Can you talk about the city's approach in its own hiring?
Yeah, well, first of all, good morning to all. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I'm really honored to be able to have this conversation and really just serve as the messenger for the great work that our team has been doing. We are joined by the incredible folks from our People Operations Cabinet, among other city departments, and here with, I already see so many different partners who are leading, whether it's at RCC with Sheriff Tompkins on the board, or the Chamber, and UMass Boston, and all of the work that's happening around the city. I think first, just to ground us in, from the public's sector's perspective, it hasn't been that different necessarily in this moment of extreme flexibility in how you work, in shifting patterns of where people want to make decisions about where they live relative to where their workplace is, and therefore that just creating a lot of churn right now. When I started in this office 3 years ago, we were in a place of needing to put a lot of foundation in place. Many of our city workforce, 23,000 strong employees, many are part of employee unions and collective bargaining units. And that defines the wages, salaries, cost of living increases, other types of working conditions that are negotiated in multi-year contracts with the city. And when I came into office, for the very first time ever, I believe, 48 bargaining units all had an expired contract. Usually they turn over in kind of staggered sets, and there might be a few that are under bargaining at any one time, but because of the pandemic, because of different transitions, we were really starting with the vast majority of our workforce had not had a cost of living increase in some time, and many vacancies in that. The vacancies, of course, as experienced in many other industries, were concentrated in the areas where people have a lot of options of ways that they could earn more outside the public sector, and often in some of the most critical functions of the city. We were having extreme difficulty staffing school buses with bus drivers, the 911 call center with call takers, different roles in IT or in the what requires a CDL license to drive snow plows or street sweepers in our public works and street transportation department. And so some of this was just saying, okay, let's see this as an opportunity to build from the beginning how we want to think about our workforce, approaching even the process of setting working conditions collectively in a different way. Some of those have actually led to operational changes and improvements that have delivered benefits to residents. Quick set of examples with our teachers, for example, we were able through the contract for the very first time to come to an agreement on how to really start beginning a major set of reforms on special education and and we're still very much in the midst of that, but to build some things in that had not been possible in previous contracts for decades. With our bus drivers also, to add performance metrics and some accountability standards to tie that to how performance would end up happening in partnership with the city. With some of our largest unions, to build in a different structure so that rather than having 1% increase across the board, so that higher wage workers would have the biggest increase and lower wage workers would have the smallest. We added a stipend piece so that lower wage workers would actually have the biggest jump and therefore close some of the gaps. And so that was the context of we had a lot of hiring to do and had to rethink it in order to compete among all the different industries. And to manage that, the very first change was to think about how we support our workforce. We had 2 departments that were created to really coordinate and have accountability. One is our people operations cabinet, many of whom are here today, and changing from a pure HR mentality of how we administer salary documents on time and get direct deposit and all of that in one place, over to a mindset of how do we support professional development? How do we empower our workforce to see this as a career ladder that they're going to get support on moving up and in their careers and having the rigor to be able to think of this as a career, not just one role. The other cabinet that was created was worker empowerment, to really partner inside and outside City Hall in how we think about workforce development in general. That's how we've set up some of our larger initiatives, City Academy, in partnership with UMass Boston and other partners, where we have now built our own in-house hiring pipelines to help people while they are with bus drivers, for example, we had to search around for who had a CDL license and then try to recruit them, versus now we take members from our community, they are paid to get their CDL license and get trained for that, and then can be step into these jobs. Same thing with EMTs, same thing with some of our jobs in the Parks Department and other roles. And then to make sure we're doing training on workplace safety for construction jobs, for example, or really doing outreach, shifting away from job fairs, where we are out with flyers and people can take some information on a job that they could apply to later, and instead having a hiring day where our staff are ready to take people's resumes, interview them on the spot, and then slot them into roles immediately. So trying to break down the walls between community and hiring, and also between the idea of having one job that you're then in and you fill the next job, and instead having a career ladder through the city as an organization.
So a lot of on-the-job training, it sounds like, that you're doing. And have you removed requirements for college degrees for some jobs, or was that already in place?
We're in the midst of, as the state is, of really going through our job descriptions and being fine-tuning that. With 23,000 roles, it takes a little bit of time. But because so many of our jobs are defined by civil service, there's also some more stringent requirements in different places of certifications that have to be met. So, but it's a process that we've been working with industry partners on as well. Our Life Sciences Initiative, which has committed to place 1,000 Boston residents in life sciences jobs that are much needed in the field, partnering with major employers like Vertex, trainers like RCC, and some of the other community organizations. We are working with them to scrub some of the job descriptions and make them more accessible based on skills or experience, rather than just a resume point or a degree or certain qualification that might not be actually needed for the job. And we're looking to do that ourselves as well.
Are there certain skills or even characteristics that people have that apply to a lot of jobs that you feel that make them more hireable, and they don't necessarily need the academic credential or experience, but if they have, X, Y, and Z, they could fit into a lot of different roles? Are there any specific things like that you look for in hiring these workers?
Well, for many of our city jobs, they are about reliability. They are about interacting and being able to listen and take in the needs of our constituents and residents and finding ways to make systems work. And so there are any number of pathways to being amazing at that. You could work your way up, learn on the job within the city. You could have had leadership or management experience in a different organization that translates over. You could have the type of role that also puts you in a customer service kind of mindset. And so depending on which type of role we're trying to fill, there are many, many ways in which a non-degree credential or set of years of experience or type of experience can transfer right over.
And obviously this is helping the city to fill jobs, but what are the other benefits to doing this kind of hiring? Obviously there's an equity piece to it that's allowing a broader array of people to apply for jobs that maybe they wouldn't be qualified for if they couldn't afford to go to college or they hadn't had time to build a traditional career path if they're, say, a single mom raising kids. Can you talk a little bit about how it benefits not just the city's workforce, but the city as a whole?
This is a piece that I think we're all trying to grapple with as Boston is in the midst of trying to be ahead of the curve when it comes to the changing nature of work, and also grappling with a housing crisis where the gap between supply and demand and the prices that people are facing are causing tremendous pressure and displacement in the city. And so many of the jobs, or oftentimes, as Marcelo, the chancellor, was saying, in this cognitive era, sometimes we think of the jobs that the city is receiving as tech jobs primarily, or those that might require a coding background or more specialized background, and companies, therefore, that are moving jobs here are going to look to hire people from all around the country or world to fit those jobs. We want to make sure that we're a city that does both, to be able to recruit and retain from anywhere, for Boston to be welcoming for everyone, and to make sure that our residents in our communities have the skills and access to the jobs to begin with. Because particularly when we're talking about housing and, how do I put this? Boosting the number of jobs in any community is a win-win. It's a win for generational wealth and creating opportunity for our residents. It's a win for companies that have the growth capacity and can tap into talent, which is probably the #1 driver of where companies are making decisions to go now. The only wrinkle in that is if you end up not being able to have the infrastructure to support a growing population base. And so we are working very hard at the same time as recruiting everyone to come to make sure that people not only want to be here because they have the jobs, but can afford to be here with housing and transportation infrastructure and a lot of what we always are discussing as well.
Right. And are there any departments or jobs where looking at this skills-based hiring works better than in others, or some places where it doesn't work? I mean, is it just entry-level jobs that we're talking about here, or are there some higher-level roles that this kind of hiring approach also works for?
Again, I mean, I almost wish I could bring my team up here because I know they thought very deeply about this. I can think of specific examples where it's been at every level up and down the chain, and having that experience, lived experience, professional experience to sub in can be at a management level, it could be at an entry level, and it's really about how we connect the pipeline so that people understand how to move up between different roles or even between different departments with the city. We want to be an ecosystem for professional development rather than just an entity that finds people who can deliver services to the general public.
And you mentioned earlier, you said that you're doing away with job fairs and you're doing more, I think you said, hiring days. Can you talk about what that difference is and how that changes the nature of how people get hired into the city?
There are thousands of roles that we are trying to fill every single year in the city. With a 23,000 strong employee base, there's always churn and there are always new opportunities and looking to fill roles. So I'm told that this year, so far, we have made 7,500 hires just over this last calendar year, or is it the fiscal year? Calendar year. And so that's the scale of how we are trying to bring people into the organization at all different levels of roles. And previously, there was a little bit of, okay, if you want to become a police officer, you have to know how to sign up to take the exam. Same thing with becoming an EMT or paramedic. If you want to join the city, you have to figure out how to navigate the web portal to apply online, or oftentimes the jobs may already have been posted and sort of awareness happens earlier than that out in the community. And we want to have one focused, one-stop shop for community members to be able to directly step into these jobs. They're most effective when, again, people know there's an immediate opportunity that showing up means that you could walk away and go home with employment that day, but also that we are partnering with specific community organizations to do those hiring days. So we're tapping into the networks that already exist within communities and with the organizations that have been doing this work for a very long time. There's also outreach for these days that are happening in different and I think a little bit more non-traditional ways, whether it is advertising on public transportation or in certain healthcare settings in the waiting room. There's information there on how to now become part of the city workforce, and we're trying to just get the information out of City Hall into the hands of community members and directly into our neighborhoods.
Great. There's an audience question, which is a great question. It's that, is there information on how job seekers can prepare for these on-the-spot interviews? You're going in having to be a lot more ready to do an interview, I'm assuming here.
I wouldn't say that I would defer to the team on if there are particular standards that are communicated in advance. But the goal is that many of these jobs, we're looking for great people. We're not looking for the perfect answer to X, Y, Z questions or needing someone to be able to recite a certain number, the city charter or anything like that. This is about coming and just talking about who you are, what you've done, and being able to share your own experience. And because many of these then will come with on-the-job hiring, we hope that they're as accessible as possible and you don't need to feel like you have to have pre-work or preparation that's set aside in order to qualify for coming to a hiring day.
There was, last December, I wrote a little bit about this. The city interviewed clients from Immigrant Family Services Institute in Mattapan, looking directly for some of these migrants that have just arrived here. And they told me that they had identified about 20 mostly Haitian migrants as possible hires for entry-level jobs in the city. I think snow removal, cleaning, library work, security. I just wondered if you knew if any of those people got hired and how that went. Just love to get an update on that.
Yeah, we pulled the statistics because it was great to get a flag that you were interested. So a little more than half of those residents were hired made it through the hiring process and were hired and are with the city now. They are working and delivering services to our residents in the Parks Department, in the Streets Cabinet, and in property management. So we it was a successful model and hope to keep that going.
That's great. And have you done any other hiring events like that where you're really specifically targeting certain groups of people?
Yeah, again, sometimes it comes with the types of community partners that we are really looking to work with. Our Black Men and Boys Commission, for example, is an incredible partner, and Frank Farrow, the director of that office, has really been working with different community organizations in settings within the community versus in City Hall for people to come and participate in the hiring days. And there's a cross-section of departments that have also been trained on how to participate in hiring days so that they know what to expect and are ready to make it available to bring people in on the spot as well.
Can you talk a little bit about what people with maybe non-traditional backgrounds can bring to these jobs that might have had more strict requirements in the past? Say they don't have a college degree or they've worked in a different kind of role. There's lots of research that shows that having a diverse group of workers, having women, say, or people of color in a workforce, brings more innovation and sparks different ideas than, say, just a group of all white men. I wonder how that's working in the city, and if you are seeing an ability to further diversify your people who have maybe non-traditional backgrounds into some of these roles.
Yeah, I'm really proud that in terms of, there's obviously a lot of work to do in making sure that our entire workforce is reflective of our entire community, but we've made significant strides, and in the hires that have happened over the last 3 years, there's been a far greater percentage of residents of color who have stepped into these roles at every level. And sometimes within city jobs, it can take several years to move in leadership, given civil service requirements and how those promotional positions can happen. But we know that with the police department, for example, or with the EMTs, with the fire department, having a cadet program as an entry point into those jobs, supplementing and in addition to the traditional ways that people might find out about them, that has been a key booster of being able to bring residents whose backgrounds truly reflect our communities. So we have had now multiple police cadet classes start. The recruit classes that have gone into the police academy have been by far the most diverse the city has ever seen. And we started the first EMT cadet program in 20 years and the first fire cadet program ever, which was made possible through state legislation several years ago, but finally implemented. And those have been direct pipelines to, now this starts at the entry level for those agencies as they work their way up in leadership, as well as trying to ensure that when we're making leadership appointments, they're also reflective. And so the police department has the most diverse command staff that they have ever had at this point under Commissioner Cox's leadership, and we're trying to mirror all of that throughout city departments. Because our services tend to be very tangible, right? We hope that almost everyone has had the experience or might have had a personal encounter with a library in their neighborhood or a public park or a community center. It can be so valuable when community members come into these roles with just their lived experience and their accumulated professional experience that connects directly to that service that they're now going to be working to provide to others. And so there are many within our leadership ranks in our cabinet. Chief of Human Services Jose Masso, who oversees all of our community centers and several other departments. He started as a lifeguard in his professional career in our community centers and knows them then inside out. Same thing with police and schools. Superintendent Skipper has started as a teacher in the classroom and worked her way up as well. And so having those kinds of lived experiences that connect directly to what our residents are experiencing when they access city services can be the most valuable of all.
Right, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's also challenges that come with this type of hiring, I imagine, and you mentioned on-the-job training, and I wonder, is it a much heavier lift sometimes if you're bringing people in who don't have the exact credentials that normally fit into a job, that you have to spend more time training them and giving them orientation?
I mean, with City Academy, for example, it's certainly more time and resources, but the return on investment is far greater than any of the costs in the program. Again, it's instead of finding someone who already has a commercial driver's license to step into a role in the Public Works Department, clearing the streets of snow, et cetera, being able to open it up to anyone. We know there will be some drop-off. We know some people will join the CDL license training program who ultimately will decide that this role is not for them. And we have to bake that a little bit into our training numbers. But the investments that are made open up an entirely new pool of candidates for these roles where staffing has been a challenge and remains a challenge in many communities. I'll just mention another category of jobs and industry that we're really focused on that takes collaboration across the entire city and city departments and our partners. Fairly recently, the city received the largest NOAA grant from the National Oceanic and something administration on the weather side at the federal level, and it's for green jobs training. And so these climate resilience focused jobs, a $10 million grant that will empower us to place 500 Boston residents into infrastructure management, into thinking about sea level rise and dealing with heat mitigation. That was a partnership that was created through our worker empowerment cabinet among city departments and with training organizations who are committed to placing these residents. We know that we will end up with more than 500 residents in jobs. Just the organizations that have come together to pledge openings, to say we have this number of vacancies that we are going to set aside for this program over the next few years, 1,300 jobs have been committed through this. And so we have the funding to get the training off the ground. And with that, with life sciences, the idea is that the city can convene, seed the infrastructure for how we create the workforce development and training pipelines, and then it will be off and running in some ways on its own because it makes so much sense for the employers to tap in and have that convenient resource to be able to reach the best talent.
And you mentioned it was specifically for Boston residents. I'm wondering, do the jobs filled for the city, do you have to live in Boston to get them?
We still have a residency requirement, but it's a little bit speckled, I would say. So for many of our collective bargaining units, the policy that has been negotiated is 10 years of residency in the city, and if they're in the role beyond that or in the same union and department beyond that, then residency is a choice. Certain jobs, there's a very limited number that do not have residency, and some we have administered time-limited waivers to allow people to move into the city for 6 months, for example, in order to recognize that it can be a hardship trying to find housing in a very expensive market.
Right, that's why I brought it up. Yeah,
coming in.
Yeah. Okay. And another challenge. This seems to me in this kind of hiring that I wonder if it opens you up to pushback from maybe workers who are already in some of these roles, who have a college degree or have X years of experience, and then they see a newcomer coming in with not the same kind of experience, not the same credentials, maybe making the same salary range. I just wonder if you've experienced that, or if there's any mechanisms in place to keep that kind of intra-office or workplace dynamic, to assuage those concerns.
I haven't heard at that scale any examples. I'm looking at the team too and getting some no's. I think the one embodiment of how our city workforce actually functions is by the time you get to snow being cleared off the ground or trash being picked up or a street light or pothole fixed, there are so many hands that have touched that one constituent's request for it to happen, that the very ethos of teamwork has to be baked into anything that we do. We all rely on everyone else in the office to do their jobs, and it's not at the scale of theoretical, do I think someone is at this level qualification or that. We are sleeves rolled up, getting the work done every single day, and that's the standard that we hold ourselves to. So when our largest employee union, with a wide range of salaries included among their membership, voted so that in effect their highest wage members would be giving up the straight percentage increase in order to ensure that we were closing the gap to retain workers in critical roles that we had been losing or having a hard time filling, that was done by a vote of the membership, and it passed overwhelmingly to try to address and close those gaps, because we recognize that the most intensive or technical jobs still cannot function or end up delivering the service without everyone else who is involved in that department as well.
Okay, great. Well, it looks like we're out of time, so it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much for being here. There are some great sessions coming up. Be sure to keep watching. There's a full schedule at globe.com/summit. The next session will begin on live stream in about 5 minutes. And a quick reminder that all of the sessions are being recorded and will be made available afterward for viewing. So thank you for being part of the community, and enjoy the rest of the event. And I'll turn things back to Marcelo now.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Thank you, Mayor Wu, for the pithy, clear, on-point exchanges. I think it's fair to say that now and moving forward, great cities will thrive when all our communities have the skills, and that is socio-emotional, cultural, cognitive, and metacognitive, to take on the fundamental challenges cities will be facing now and moving forward. Boston is an iconic city, and the entire world looks to this jewel to understand, to learn, to share the ways in which we're preparing our communities to thrive in the 21st century. Thank you so much.